heart of where innovation, money, and power collide in Silicon Valley and beyond. This is Bloomberg Technology with Caroline Hyde and Ed Ludlow.
Live from Bloomberg's World Headquarters in New York, I'm Caroline Hyde.
And in the Big Apple, back together, I'm Ed Ludlow. This is Bloomberg Technology.
Coming up, full earnings coverage ahead. We're going to be breaking down the results from Uber and sit down with the CEO, Dara Khosrowshahi.
Plus, we'll speak to the CEO of Figma about where Adobe's $20 billion purchase of the company stands and take a look at new AI tools that they've unveiled.
And we'll bring you the big takeaways from OpenAI's first ever developers conference as the AI startup unveils custom GPTs. But first, let's check in on these markets because, look, what a run we are having. 8 straight days of gains currently on the NASDAQ. So S&P 500, 7 days, leave it for dust. We're currently up 0.9%, the best run that we've seen since November 2021. What's galvanizing that? Well, still it's the Federal Reserve. The hopes that maybe that hiking period is coming to an end. It certainly is driving some yields down as well. We're currently off by some 10 basis points. Looking at what's happening in the world of New York crude, we are off by about 3.5%. So some of the geopolitical risks and anxieties just dialing down a little bit in the world of commodities. And of course, that dials back the inflationary pressures. We're currently at $78 for New York crude. Moving on, have a quick look at what is, well, our sort of risk sentiment of choice when it comes to tech. And it's interesting that even with the dollar down, we've got crypto down further, Ed. We're currently off by, well, a percentage point for Bitcoin. I mean, it's small fry when you're thinking of a volatile asset, but 34,670 is basically where we're trading at the moment. Ed, what have you got on the micro?
Well, speaking of volatility, Uber's been an interesting one to track. You can see we opened low. We're now up 3 percentage points. When earnings hit in pre-market, the stock drops as much as 8%. The story there was revenue missing estimates in the quarter gone, but that's down to a specific business model change, an accounting issue that impacted revenue negatively in the quarter gone to the tune of $520 million. From there, the street is looking at the outlook for the fourth quarter, both in terms of gross bookings, but also EBITDA. That's been the story. Many consecutive quarters of positive EBITDA for Uber, and then that looks to be continuing. We'll change our attentions to GAAP profitability on an operating income basis. That always happens with tech companies as they go through their life cycle into the next phase of life. But right now, Uber 3% higher, and the street on the whole does like what it sees.
It does, certainly with the run rate on profitability. Let's dig into these Uber earnings. We're pleased to be welcoming to the show the CEO of that very company, Dara Khosrowshahi, as well as, of course, our own Emily Chang of Bloomberg News. Emily, take it away first.
Caroline, thank you so much. Dara, thank you as well as always for joining us. So look, Uber shares have almost doubled this year, but they were a little volatile this morning on the upswing now. What's the message to investors who are seeing mixed signals here?
Well, the message to investors is that we had another record quarter and that the business is accelerating and actually surprised us on the top line. Our gross bookings came in over $35 billion, up 20% on a constant currency basis, accelerated versus an already high growth rate in Q2. If you look at the number of trips taken on the platform, 2.4 billion trips this last quarter. That's 27 million trips taken every single day. That was up 25% on a year-on-year basis. Again, an acceleration over last quarter where trips grew 22%. We did have a revenue accounting adjustment. And basically, it was taking marketing costs and incentives. We do provide incentives to customers, discounts to spur demand. And while they used to be classified as marketing costs in previous years and previous quarters, they were classified as contra revenue. And our revenue then stated revenue grew 10%. But it's really the geography of marketing classified as contra revenue took down a reported revenue by 8%. Doesn't affect the bottom line at all. So our adjusted EBITDA came in at $1.092 billion, up over 100% on a year-on-year basis. And then, of course, we were, again, GAAP net income profitable with over $200 million in net income. And it's something that we expect to be profitable going forward as an enterprise.
Right, your second quarter of profitability. Revenue is growing more slowly, though, over the last several quarters. So, what are your longer-term what's your longer term view on where the growth is going to come from? And, those who are concerned about market saturation.
Well, the revenue growth slowdown is, again, purely as a result of these accounting reclassifications. If you look at the business and the bookings growth, which is really consumer demand, both on the ride side and on the delivery side, both of them accelerated. So our mobility business grew gross bookings 30% on a year-on-year basis. It was an acceleration over Q2. We saw strength all over the world, but we saw particular strength in the Asia-Pacific regions and Latin American regions as a result of some of the newer products that we've introduced, taxi, two-wheelers, motorcycles that, are Uber motorbikes that can whiz through traffic, et cetera. And then on the delivery side, our gross bookings grew 16%, again, an acceleration over Q2 when they grew 14%. And that's just food delivery continuing to be super popular with consumers all around the world. It's our growing faster than the general category. We gained category position in 9 out of 10 top 10 markets all around the world. And it's our newer grocery offerings, expanding beyond just food into grocery, alcohol, pet food, whatever you want delivered to your home. We want Uber Eats to be there. So the strength continues. The consumer, U.S. consumer, global consumer continues to be strong. And that's definitely been a tailwind for our business.
You've been building out your advertising business, and I'm curious where you see the biggest opportunity there. Who's the target demo? Where's the most upside? Where's the best place to show folks in the app new advertising? And how does that play out?
Well, the biggest part of our advertising business are restaurants who are looking to improve their placement inside of the marketplace by targeting consumers or eaters who are likely to want to eat from that restaurant. And these are mostly small and medium businesses and enterprises like McDonald's or Wendy's, et cetera, who advertise on our platform. And because we know so much about our consumers, all our data, et cetera, we can identify consumer segments who are likely to react, so to speak, to that advertising. And as a result, advertising revenue continues to grow at significant numbers. We targeted $1 billion in advertising for next year. We're pacing on that target. We're going to exceed that target as well. The number of advertisers who are advertising on Uber is up 70% on a year-on-year basis. It's over 400,000 businesses as well. Now, one of the newer advertising products that we're very excited about is actually branded advertisements. And you might see those branded advertisements when you're using your Uber app and you're waiting for your car. We might show you an ad from an Apple or a credit card company or an upcoming movie. Our demographic consumer tends to be urban, tends to be very high income, and we have very big hopes for our branded advertising business as well.
Dara, we've gone deep here on the numbers, which Emily and Caroline know I love doing. But I just have a big picture question for you. What does Uber look like in 5 years from now? And what are the steps that you take to meet your vision for Uber in 5 years' time?
Well, I think in 5 years' time, we really want to be that operating system for everyday life for you personally. We want you to wake up and think about Uber. Am I going to have breakfast? Am I going to top up my groceries if I'm cooking tonight? Going to the office, coming back to the office. We really want Uber to be there every day to help you in your life, to get you where you're going, and to save time from some of these tasks. There are some people who like grocery shopping, but there are a ton of people who don't like grocery shopping. There are a ton of people who just want to eat at home, et cetera. And we want Uber to be that relevant life partner or life operating system for you, really all over the world.
Is the freight unit, Dara, still part of that vision in 5 years' time? There's been talk from our own Bloomberg analysis that maybe that's spun off.
Well, freight is a very promising segment for us that is suffering now from kind of the great freight recession that you see. Freight rates are coming down post-pandemic as a result of an oversupply situation. There are a ton of digital brokers and actually analog traditional brokers going out of business now. One of our big competitors, Convoy, for example, announced that they were going out of business a couple of weeks ago. And those rates have hit our freight business as well. It was down 27% year on year. It lost some money. But the technology of matching supply and demand in a digital way, we still think has incredible promise. As the freight business cleans up to some extent and some of the smaller players move out, we think that Uber Freight is going to emerge as one of the players with the best technology out there. We've actually invested into the transportation management part of the business. So not only do we connect you with a trucker to go from point A to B, we're helping you with your whole freight network and using machine learning, using the power of the data that we have to create a more effective shipping network for you. We think that's a very promising business. And at this point, we are absolutely investing in freight and innovating around freight.
Dara, Uber's been in the AI business for a long time, but I know you're integrating it more and more into the platform. Where have you seen the biggest value add so far? And where do you expect to see the biggest value add from AI in the future?
Well, AI is intermingled into every part of our platform. And, every single time you see a price on Uber, every single time we make an offer to a driver on Uber, every time we match you up with a vehicle, route you, all of that is powered by AI. Some of the newer AI kind of innovations that you see with large language models are helping us automate some tasks that were difficult to automate previously or difficult to train machine learning algos previously. One is, for example, document transcription. If you put in your license, your insurance, background checks, et cetera, documents, we can transcribe those with the power of machine learning versus having humans look at it. Humans, as it turns out, often make more mistakes than algorithms. We actually combine both into call it a superhuman. Another area that we think is quite promising is actually on the customer service side. Anytime someone reaches out to us in customer service, we have to be aware of, your history with Uber. We've got to be aware of the context, what's going on in that particular time, and also what are our policies, and our policies differ all over the world. Again, machine learning algorithms can go through all of that at the click of the button, essentially, and then get back to the customer, and we think actually provide an elevated customer service at a lower cost, something that's super excited for us.
All right, well, thanks there to Uber CEO Dara Khosrowshahi, and of course Bloomberg's Emily Chang out in SF. Really big morning actually on the Uber earnings front. A lot of volatility in the stock, but a wide-ranging conversation. Now, coming up here on Bloomberg Technology, OpenAI wraps up its first ever developers conference in San Francisco. We have the key takeaways from someone who is there on the ground, a good friend of ours out in SF. This is Bloomberg Technology.
GPTs are tailored versions of ChatGPT for a specific purpose. You can build a GPT, a customized version of ChatGPT for almost anything, with instructions, expanded knowledge, and actions, and then you can publish it for others to use.
OpenAI CEO Sam Altman there at the company's first ever developers conference, where they unveiled custom versions of ChatGPT. Let's go to Bloomberg's Rachel Metz. You were in the building, assessing all the euphoria around it. But ultimately, is this going to fend off the competition, Rachel?
That is a great question. I think that you're starting to see them think about a little bit what are other companies doing, but also what can we do really well? How can we get people interested in using our products even more for different things? And the fact is that you can use something like ChatGPT for all sorts of things, but it would work even better if you customized it and made it more something like a homework helping bot or a recipe bot, those sorts of things, and give it a little extra data, train it in a certain way, and perhaps it'll be a little bit something like the App Store that Apple really came up with years ago,
Exactly.
where people weren't quite sure what to do at first with it, right? And then after a while, it was like, this is what we do. And some things won't work, but some things really will.
Well, that was something that a lot of folks were talking about that caught their attentions. OpenAI to do a digital store and introduce revenue sharing, kind of like X has done in some ways, the platform formerly known as Twitter. What do we learn about that future OpenAI store, Rachel?
We know that there is going to be some looking over of the GPTs, as they're calling them, these customized chatbots, before people are allowed to offer them to other people, similar to what Apple and Google, et cetera, do with their respective app stores. It's not 100% clear to me yet how the revenue share is going to work in terms of if people are downloading these things a lot, if the creator is going to get paid a certain amount of money. I think some of that stuff is still TBD.
We want to thank you, Rachel Metz, bringing all the inside track of what the event was like. Ed, over to you.
Yeah, we have a quick talking tech. And first up, Elon Musk's SpaceX is on track for $15 billion of sales in 2024. That, according to Bloomberg sources. The company's Starlink internet business is showing growth such that it's expected to outpace and exceed the company's rocket launch business. Starlink could account for more than $10 billion in total sales for next year, one source told me. Plus, WeWork shutters its doors, the company filing for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in New Jersey. This capping a tumultuous few years in which the company's navigated a failed merger, COVID-19 lockdowns, a blank check merger, and of course a slow return to office trend. WeWork once commanded a $47 billion valuation back in 2019, but it has listed $19 billion of liabilities. And then you look at who might be impacted as creditors, Caro, a big name on there.
Creditors' credibility of one Masayoshi Son. Interestingly, here in New York, they've already dumped 40 New York City office leases since that announcement. So notable moves already, Ed. But we've got some notable moves that are happening in the world of publicly traded companies, and Apple's one to be keeping an eye out on.
Yeah, and reported by who else? Bloomberg's Mark Gurman. A rare move, but Apple has basically hit pause on developing most of next year's software updates for iPhone, iPad, Mac, and some other devices because it's trying to fix some bugs. Gurman says that this delay has been announced internally to employees. He's now reporting those details, and we'll bring you more on it throughout the day. This is Bloomberg Technology. Figma is launching new AI features for its collaborative tool, FigJam. The new AI version aims to boost productivity with new features to generate, summarize, and sort files, among other things. Delighted to be joined by Figma's CEO, Dylan Field. And Dylan, Caroline and I were talking about this morning, about the technology base for what you've announced. Where does the technology come from? Is it your own large language model or foundation model powering this, or have you gone to a third party?
Well, it's great to be here, and thank you for having me. Just to back up a little bit, Figma's platform, we try to make it so that people can go all the way from idea to design to production and software code. And what we're launching today is our new FigJam AI features, which will help it make it so that you can do meetings better and have more productive working sessions and brainstorms in FigJam. And with FigJam AI, we're really excited to see how people use it. And we're using our foundational model that we're using is from OpenAI. We're using GPT-4. Yeah, definitely something that we could reconsider in the future. We have done a lot of work on the prompt engineering in particular so that we can make it so that we're able to better lower the floor and make it so that more people are able to have better working meetings, but also raise the ceiling and make it so you can do more in our product in FigJam.
So you've outlined basically how this is going to help customers. Dylan, what does ultimately product design look like once AI has really taken charge? I mean, where will the human interact with AI? Where will ultimately be able to just put in a prompt and have, well, the latest fintech app built within a blink of an eye?
Yeah, I think that ultimately, first of all, for FigJam AI, we're much more focused on how do you take the busy work out of creating great meetings and brainstorms. But if you think forward to Figma Design and how we're going to take AI and put it into more of our product experience, whether it's design or even development with Dev Mode, the new product we launched earlier this year at Config, I think that AI will really help you get to a great first draft, but it'll still take a great team to get to that final product. And I think though that it'll make it so that you can do more and be even more productive and efficient. And we're really excited to see where that takes our users. But yeah, right now I think it's more about how do you get away from the busy work, not how the robots take over.
You called it, by the way, when we were chatting, Caroline. We were like, which LLM? Interesting choice on OpenAI. Look, it's been a year, Dylan, since you announced that you would be acquired by Adobe. Is that actually going to happen? I mean, what are the chances that the deal falls through?
We're very optimistic and really excited about what we can do with Adobe. I think that there's such complementary strengths that Adobe and Figma can bring together. So we've seen with Adobe all their work with Firefly and what they've done with AI, and Figma can learn a lot from Adobe there. But also, Figma has gone into new audiences, such as developers with Dev Mode. And we think that we can bring a lot to Adobe there as well. And we just can't wait to get this done and to work together.
You've already been brainstorming about you as a consolidated unit, what actually you can bring to consumers, how your products change. It's interesting, actually, that the EU regulators were worrying about how your use of AI might end up, fending off competition even further. How do you think AI brought together with Adobe and yourself might change the game a little bit?
Look, I think that all companies will benefit from AI. And I'm really excited to see how different companies are able to bring AI into their solutions just to make better products for everyone. So Adobe and Figma are no exceptions. I think that both companies will do great things here. And this is the very start. There's so much more to come, and it's really hard to predict the future, but obviously we're building towards it.
It's hard to predict the future. I'm still going to ask you to try. There's a lot of interest in Figma's own momentum, right? That's why there was so much excitement about the deal with Adobe. What is your customer momentum like? What is it that you're carrying into this potential deal close?
Yeah, obviously I can't share exact numbers, but it's been a very exciting year at Figma. We've added, I think, about 500 employees now since the deal was announced. We've introduced new products like Dev Mode, as well as advanced prototyping, variables, and held a user conference called Config with 8,500 people coming. Honestly, it's felt like we've been accelerating our pace, and I hope to continue that acceleration and momentum into the deal close.
Well, really nice to have you here talking us through it, Figma CEO Dylan Field. Thanks so much for your time today. And meanwhile, coming up, look, we just talked about AI. We're going to talk about it a little bit more, surprise, surprise. But we're also talking about it in relationship to misinformation, how it could be impacting elections. Look, we've got elections in the US right here, right now. I'm going to speak with a key professor of responsible AI over at the Michigan State University next. Ed?
Quick look at Roku, up 0.8%. Cathie Wood's ARK said Monday they'd sold Roku, which was recently their biggest holding. I still have one Roku TV in my house. From New York City, side by side, this is Bloomberg Technology. Welcome back to Bloomberg Technology. I'm Ed Ludlow. Ooh.
And I'm Caroline Hyde, one of those days. Let's get a quick check on the markets at the moment, because we're on a bit of a tear. We've got a desire to get into tech names in particular. In fact, we have been up for 8 straight days on the NASDAQ and indeed on the NASDAQ 100. Longest winning streak since November 2021. What's adding the fuel to the fire? Why are we up more than 8%? Because some of the big tech names are rising on the day. Let's flip it over and look at some of the micro names. And in fact, Microsoft heading ever towards yet a new record high at the moment. We're currently up by just 4.75 point, but that's still 1.3% to the upside. Datadog absolutely flying. New York-based company up 30%, let's call it, as we see this software company outperform, really raising its guidance on its back of its numbers. Uber as well, managing to be on the higher side after its earnings as well. We see that it's really pushing towards, well, the forecast being one that the investor base is liking. We're up 2.4%. And Apple, still higher, more than a percentage point higher. That's as we get a scoop coming from our own Mark Gurman, who's saying, look, they might have to put pause to some software initiatives and indeed improvements next year, because as they want to iron out some glitches. In particular, that'll be across the phone, the iMac, across the Mac, of course, and increase across most of their software. But Ed, what are we looking at in terms of individual moves today?
Yeah, look, some of the biggest names in mega cap tech are kind of in the spotlight this week for political reasons. Officials from Meta, Google, Microsoft, and Adobe are all heading to Capitol Hill tomorrow for another Senate forum on AI's growing influence on American elections and democracy. The forum is part of a series of closed-door discussions that Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has been leading since September to help members get up to speed on the technology and, in the end, regulate it. We're going to dive deep into this conversation on this election day with Anjana Susala, professor of responsible AI at Michigan State University. The way that we frame it in our daily politics newsletter is that today's election is kind of a testing ground for the events of 2024. And in the context of technology companies and social media companies, do you see it that way, Professor?
Yes, absolutely. I think this is a test of multiple things. One is the provenance of some of the methods used to identify deep fakes. And also misinformation has gotten very sophisticated in today's world. So how can platforms enforce all these policies where, given the volume of misinformation that's out there, what are some sort of content moderation policies that platforms can responsibly implement?
And to that end, how much can artificial intelligence be something that fights it as well as adds fuel to the fire ultimately, Anjana? Which side is going to be winning out here? How can we use artificial intelligence to help fight off this rise in misinformation?
Well, there's definitely a lot of methods that platforms have used. Meta, for example, uses these methods called self-supervised learning to identify deep fakes and fake news. And sometimes what happens is there'll be issues where we have a known source of misinformation and it's debunked and removed from the platform. But they can be very easy, you can duplicate essentially the same information and spread it in a different way. And so platforms have gotten good at those kinds of enforcement issues. So AI has helped tremendously in those kinds of cracking down on some known sources of misinformation. What is, I think, challenging from an AI perspective is things where there are half-truths or rumors that can lead to maybe people not showing up and voting, like active, voter turnout, disinformation effects. I think those are challenges for AI.
Professor, Caroline and I have covered election cycles, and we've talked about social media companies, be it Meta, X, formerly known as Twitter. And in that period, they have talked to us about the actions they're taking on content moderation, but also said that it's not their responsibility to oversee everything, essentially. What's interesting about AI is it gives them a new technological tool. Is it a sufficient tool for them to get it right this time around?
I think it's only one part of the arsenal of tools that they have. And in the sense that, it's not completely maybe platforms' responsibility alone, because we also need a sort of a coalition of citizens and platforms working together to solve the larger challenge of disinformation and misinformation, especially given it's so easy to create and manipulate the truth and so easy to spread, AI-assisted deepfakes and so forth.
I want to also bring to our audience's awareness that, of course, today is not just about election in the focus, but it still continues to be one where, in particular, the government is looking at the impact of social media on mental health, particularly those of teens and younger adults, Anjana. And at the moment, we understand a former Facebook employee and whistleblower, Arturo Bajar, is actually testifying before the Senate subcommittee about social media, its impact on teen mental health, the crisis there. And Meta's put out a statement today saying every day countless people inside and outside of Meta are working on how to help keep young people safe online. How do you rate them at this moment fighting that particular areas of concern that society has at large?
So this is actually a somewhat of a troubling area, because I think there were a lot of studies where people have tried to create, an account posing as a teenager, and the first, within the 7 or 8, sponsored ads you see or clicks that you will end up seeing content that is kind of very troubling from a teen mental health perspective. And so I think those are things where, once again, we need more transparency reports. Europe is doing that, asking platforms to provide more detail into how they are enforcing all these policies. So I think this is one area where maybe platforms also have a huge challenge. So I'm sure they are doing a lot from their end, but as citizens and when the lawmakers have a lot of questions, I think we need to ask platforms to be more truthful and transparent and share with us all their efforts in content moderation, how they are fighting all these issues.
Anjana, it's great to have your expertise on the show. Thank you. Come back. Anjana Sasala, they're Professor of Responsible AI at Michigan State University. We thank her. Meanwhile, coming up, now how to accelerate workflows for financial services businesses with, you guessed it, AI. We're going to be joined by Ayal Shina, CEO of the AI platform Blackall, coming out of stealth, Ed.
Yeah, I'm still with the earnings story as well. Global Foundries, a stock that's up 7%, on track for its biggest jump since February. Beat expectations in the quarter gone. Strong EPS forecast for the current period. Slightly disappointing revenue forecast. And what is it talking about? Uncertain economic and geopolitical situation around the world. One of the smaller contract manufacturers for chips that we like to track. This is Bloomberg Technology.
It's an AI startup world and we're just living in it. One more player comes to light, Blackall, coming out of stealth. New AI platform for financial services in particular. It's just launched today, announcing $60 million in financing, led by none other than A16Z and Oak HCFT, plus a whole list of the who's who's of VC. Let's bring in Blackall's CEO, Ayal Shina, who is going to discuss, well, ultimately what you're using $60 million for. What problem are you solving with a much hyped area of artificial intelligence?
Thank you for having me. We're very excited to announce our launch out of stealth. We're building a platform by leveraging AI that streamline an end-to-end of all of the core workflow of the back office of CPAs at the moment, and later on financial services in general. Most of the problems that we focus on now is around capacity issues for CPA firms, where there are higher complexity of the tax code, 238 million tax returns done annually in the US. But at the same time, 300,000 accountants left the job in the last 2 years. And there are 16% less accountants than 2018. So they're facing very severe capacity issues, and they're giving up on revenue and other things that they went to school in order to, to study accounting to solve for. Instead of that, they're doing very manual work. So what we're doing is we're automating all of the pieces that could be automated by a machine, and right now are struggling to find the right talent for the capacity constraint.
Ayal, Founders Fund, Khosla, Andreessen, General Catalyst, that's like the who's who of VCs backing you, and you did it coming out of stealth. I don't understand. Like, how does it work? If you're in stealth, how do they even know about you? Or is it you kicking down doors and saying, we have something really big coming?
We do have something really big coming, but we do have existing relationship with most of those investors. In my previous company, some of them were already investors. So when I started to work on this problem, I reached out and we started discussions, and we didn't have to kick too many doors.
Talk to us about the technology. Are you a maker of foundation or large language models, or do you use the underlying technology of a third party to then make an AI tool that's relevant in the financial services space?
We do build proprietary technology that consists not just from LLM, but from a combination of machine learning, automation, vision. We do use third-party technology for the LLM. We made a strategic decision not to build the LLM model yet because it's extremely expensive. But with the pace of progress, we believe that in 2 years, it will be a fraction of the cost to build it ourselves. But 90% of the technology is not leveraging LLM.
Which LLM?
Proprietary technology. We're using the usual suspects, but it's relatively less than 10% of what we're actually offering as the end product today.
So tell us about your moat. Ultimately, how do you ensure that anyone who wants to be really making their accounting work, making the job of a CPA efficient, only comes to Blackor, not others that are building similar models?
That's the main reason why we were in stealth for so long. We spent 2 years building the architecture, building the pipes, building the actual plumbing of how we pull the data, how we train a model to recognize a document, what type of a document, classify it, automatically fetching the data from within the different documents. It could be handwritten, there could be a PDF, there could be a JPEG, and we put it in the right place in the tax software without requiring the CPA to change any workflow, any tax software they're using today. And eventually, the end product is a fully completed tax return ready for the CPA to review, as well as the work products that associate with that, like tie-out, binder, and so on. It does take more than AI to build that, a lot of internal understanding of the workflow and the processes. And we started relatively early on working with many different CPA firms and tax preparation firms to make sure that we understand the workflow end to end, even before it was cool to use the word AI. We automated very big pieces of that.
Eyal, you're a serial entrepreneur and founder. You've been on this program with a different name, Fundbox. I've written about Fundbox and its fundraising.
Yeah.
So you've got a pretty good lay of the land right now. How expensive is engineering talent? Like, I know you have a big chunk of cash now, but how far is it going to go in the talent space?
Engineers are still expensive. I think just like CPAs, you have, when you want to focus on the very high caliber of talent, humans are still in high demand, hence very expensive. And especially when you start adding words like data science and AI, it makes them even more expensive. But the bottom line is that if you build the right team, you don't need to throw too much money on the problem. You don't want to hire before you have the product out there. And once you have the product, you need to be, we at least at Blackor, we're being very efficient, not just because of the burn, of the cash burn, but also an organization is becoming less efficient when you have too many people. That's something we would like to keep as long as possible.
Blackor CEO Eyal Shinar, thank you so much for your time here on Bloomberg Technology.
Thank you very much for having me.
Now, coming up on the show, social media, rockets, EVs, and brain implants. What a list. It's all part of Elon Musk's world and the focus of a new Bloomberg podcast. We're going to discuss all of that next. Karen.
Meanwhile, let's go global for a moment. Spain's Telefonica seeking to buy up the outstanding shares in its German unit, that's Telefonica Deutschland, for as much as $2.2 billion, that is, that's about 2 billion euros. It basically want to take the company private after they lost a key wholesale contract, causing the shares to absolutely plummet for that particular part of the unit, off by 0.5% when it was trading in Europe. This is Bloomberg Technology. In a rare move by Apple, the company is hitting pause on development of its next year's software updates for the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, and other devices so that it can actually root out glitches in the code. None other than Bloomberg Technology's Mark Gurman, of course, broke the story. And Mark, how out of line with usual policy is this for Apple?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So in 2019, when iOS was as buggy as ever, Craig Federighi, the senior vice president of software engineering at Apple, implemented what the company calls the Pact. The idea from 2019 until now is you cannot add any new features into iOS during its development if it's going to break other features or make the operating system more buggy. So far in development of next year's operating systems, Apple has found that a lot of that is happening. A lot of new bugs are being introduced into the software. So last week, they implemented a freeze, a pause, or a delay to the next stage of development of the next software updates. So for 1 week, all of Apple's engineers can focus entirely on fixing bugs before moving forward.
Brilliant scoop. We keep track of all of it. As always, Mark Gurman, we thank you so much for bringing it today. Meanwhile, we want to talk about today's Bloomberg Big Take. It's focusing on Elon Musk's Neuralink. as it seeks a volunteer for its first clinical trial, meaning, look, it's looking for someone willing to have a chunk of their skull removed by a surgeon so a large robot can insert a series of electrodes, super thin wires into their brain. Now, when the robot finishes, the missing piece of skull will be replaced with a computer the size of about a quarter, and that's meant to stay there for years. Its job will be to read and analyze the person's brain activity, then relay that information wirelessly to a nearby laptop or tablet.
We volunteering?
Actually, what's notable is the ideal candidate is under 40, like yourself, but actually paralyzed.
Whoa,
so it's really meant to be
I'm not
focusing
volunteering. But yeah, okay. Sticking with Musk, his sprawling business empire has granted the billionaire a degree of power and global influence that transcends the industries he reshaped. In a new weekly chat show and podcast, Bloomberg editors and reporters break down the most important stories on Musk and his empire. We're joined now by two of them, Bloomberg's Sarah Fryer and Max Chafkin. Elon Inc. We've actually all been talking about this for quite a while, but I guess starting with you, Sarah, what is the broad concept of Elon Inc.?
This is a man you can no longer think of just in terms of his disparate companies. There are 6 of them now, but he's also a geopolitical force. He affects our culture. He owns a major communication platform. He's in the car business. He's in satellites. Involved in wars. He has this power that is so vast and so interconnected that we felt that, even as he becomes a more overexposed person, perhaps directing media with his own messages, he's underexplained. His work is something that takes some journalists who actually have spoken to a lot of the people in the Musk empire and who can tell you what's really going on.
Ashley Vance, of course, writes today's big take, which is about Neuralink. And I mean, the opportunities of helping particularly people who are paralyzed are extraordinary. But of course, many would then say for that you need trust, you need safety, not to mention with spaceships, which blow up every now and then, cars as well. Where are you starting with the enormous empire with which he oversees?
Well, the show that will drop just in a few hours today, it's about Grok, which is the new chatbot created by X.AI, Elon Musk's AI company. And I think it's a really good example of what Sarah was just talking about. X.AI, standalone tech company. They've recruited some really big names from DeepMind and Google. But in certain ways, it's very closely connected to X, formerly known as Twitter, because Musk is sort of using it as an enticement to sign up for this new higher tier of service, which I believe is called Premium Plus. It costs between $16 and $22 a month. And Musk is kind of saying, if you do this, you'll get all the great benefits of X Premium Plus, but you'll also get my AI company. So again, it's hard to understand these companies separately.
That's the point of Elon Inc., though, right? These companies all have a direct relationship. And also, we're good value here, right? So you get a bonus episode dropping, which I think is about Musk's relationship with unions. I find that fascinating, because I remember covering Tesla March 2020 onwards when the pandemic hit. And the union sensed an opportunity because of Musk's position on the Fremont factory at the time. But tell us about episode 2.
Yeah, so we actually have 2 segments on the first episode. Episode 2 is a bonus episode with Ashley Vance on Neuralink, getting into some exclusive detail about what we learned or what Ashley learned, getting inside of that company. On the union issue, it is super interesting because, of course, it gets down to Tesla's finances, but it also has a serious political component. Right. Sean Fain, the leader of the UAW, is really a new kind of union boss, and in certain ways, there's a thought that maybe Elon Musk and Sean Fain are matched to each other. They're both sort of larger than life. They both have big ambitions. We will see what happens.
Sarah, ultimately, what do you want a listener to come away with? Because many would say we've had too much Elon news across every outlet of late. What's different here? How do you think you really educate in that manner?
I mean, I think we want to explain, right? And I think these 2 pieces of news that you may have heard of, the Grok AI and the union fight that may be coming up, they both are connected to Musk as a geopolitical figure and how he might affect the 2024 elections, how he's talking with governments around the world, what might be motivating him, right? And so we go into like his conflicts and his competition and what really drives Musk. And so we get sort of behind the news and explain why you should care, what you should care about, and what to look forward to as the world shifts around this extremely powerful man.
Context. Bloomberg, Max Chafkin, Sarah Fryer, really excited for the not one but two that you're going to be getting, dropping whichever course area that you currently are digesting your podcast, because we've got many, Ed. But meanwhile, that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology.
Don't forget to check out our podcast wherever you get yours. From New York,
Be busy.
this is Bloomberg.